forming this group, which I am optimistic will really help have a huge impact on Bay Area politics. I was born in Philadelphia in 1976. My parents immigrated. My grandfather was my inspiration in politics, and he served in jail for 4 years alongside Gandhi in the 1940s. My mom was a substitute school teacher. My dad, a chemical engineer. I went to public school, took out a lot of loans for law school, which I'm still paying off, and like many people here, was inspired by Bernie Sanders' campaign. Let me talk about the platform, because I think that's really what people here are interested in, and I'll talk about, of course, his plan for public college to be tuition-free, why that matters so much to me. One, I've had almost every opportunity one can think of in life. I've had a lot of good fortune. I got to work for the president. I got to write a book. I got to teach at Stanford. I got to work at a law firm, and I'm still paying all my student loans. Think about people who haven't had that opportunity. As all of you know, $27,000 of debt the average young person is graduating with. Many of them don't finish college. It's unconscionable. Between the age of 18 and 22, we need people being able to focus on their studies, whether that's vocational education, for technical education, college education. Almost every other country, so many other countries in the world do that, instead of forcing people to have to scrape by, take loans, and burdening them with almost a lifetime of debt. People say, how do you pay for it? Well, a couple easy ways. One is we have to have a wealth tax. Bruce Ackerman, a law professor at Yale, actually proposed this, and it's similar to what Bernie Sanders talked about, which is that when you have capital gains income for Warren Buffett or multiple folks, and you're making most of your income in capital gains, you want to be paying some percent of tax on that, more than the 22, 23%. And so if you actually taxed the people over $1 million on capital gains income based on their wealth, you would generate a lot of revenue that could pay for this. Also, these companies that are just recently with Apple and others that have all their profits offshore, those ought to be taxed because they're using American resources, an American company, American intellectual property protection. They shouldn't be able to avoid that corporate tax. The other part of the platform, though, that I think Bernie Sanders really talked about that didn't get sufficient attention is his foreign policy. And I come from this with a perspective of someone whose grandfather fought against colonialism, and understanding the role that we have played in the world to make sure that we're actually standing up for human rights. When you look at what we did in Iran with the toppling of Mossadegh in 1953, or the CIA, that led eventually to the Iranian Revolution because of a sense that was unjust. Or when you look at what we did to Patrice Lumumba in Congo, a democratically elected leader who was assassinated in 1961, or our support of the Saddam Hussein against Iran and the use of chemical weapons against Iranian people, or the support of the Mujahideen, which ultimately became the Taliban. Our interventions have not been ones that have led to more peace. And that's why when I go to Congress, I'm going to stand up against other foolish interventions. I was opposed to the intervention in Libya. I do not think that we ought to be committing more ground troops into Syria. Is my time up?
You're getting close. We're going to have to go to a Q&A session soon.
All right, good. So, you get the sense that I want to stand up for human rights and taking sides in these places where we haven't been successful. The final point I want to make, and then open it up, is if you go to cleanslateactionnow.org, I'm one of 7 federal candidates that doesn't take special interest money, and you can verify it on that site. So now, I've got the hook, so I'm going to open it up.
I'm going to open it up. I did receive a question for you on Facebook.
Okay.
As progressives, you know that something that is very, very important to us. It's actually kind of 2 things. One of them is the TPP. We don't want to see that go through. You have written a book about manufacturing, so we know that you do feel it's important to have those jobs here in America. So would you oppose the TPP in Congress? And the second part of that question is, what would a quote-unquote perfect trade deal look like to you? And then the second one that I got on Facebook, it was the same person, but here in Alameda County, we actually did ban fracking. Would you support a ban on fracking nationwide?
Yes, and yes. I oppose TPP, and I support a ban on fracking. Let me explain why. TPP, I mean, my two biggest concerns are that multinational corporations, as all of you know, get to form tribunals that get to adjudicate these deals. And I'm for deals that not just help American workers and Americans, but help live in the rest of the world. And that's not what's happening here. What we saw with NAFTA is that the multinational corporations benefited here, and some corporate interests benefited in Mexico. The actual farmers and peasants, they didn't benefit. They actually lost their businesses. And so what I am for is trade that has every stakeholder involved, that actually is coming for the people and not just for these multinational corporations. And that means having environmental and labor, not just standards, but stakeholders, and not giving away the arbitration like we did in the TPP to multinational corporations. So I'm strongly opposed to the TPP, and I will be a very strong voice against it. On fracking, the science is just too much in terms of the potential contamination to drinking water, the potential contamination to our environment. There are other better ways of renewable energy, solar, wind, and other forms of investments that we should do. We shouldn't rely on fracking as a crutch, and so I'm for a fracking ban.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
One, thank you for your answer and coming here. Appreciate it. And this question is going to sound a little more challenging than I
Please.
used to. So, Mike Khanna's got, like Bernie Sanders, has a voting record that's decades long, and he's been a pretty reliable progressive vote.
Yes.
Why would I vote for you instead of Mike Khanna when I generally know he's going to vote as I would?
It's a great question. I agree that he has been relatively a good vote, but I don't think he has shown the courage of leadership on a lot of progressive issues, starting with the fact that he was a pledged superdelegate for Hillary Clinton before Iowa even voted. There was nothing wrong with, and I had called for the abolishing superdelegate. He has taken an extraordinary amount of PAC and lobbyist money from PG&E, didn't speak out about the PG&E explosions in San Bruno. I did. He has taken PAC money from some of the interests with Lehigh Cement Factory and hasn't spoken out against Lehigh that's been polluting the local area. I've spoken out against the 49ers on the Santa Clara soccer park. Again, they're corporate and PAC interests. So while he has been a traditional Democratic vote, I don't think he's pushed the envelope, and he hasn't come out for some form of free college tuition. It doesn't have to be Bernie Sanders' plan, it could be Robert Wright's plan. He's been focused on lowering the interest rates. My view is Mike Khanna has been a relatively strong Democratic vote. There's no debate about that. But what we need from this district, and what we need at this time, is someone who's going to actually push the progressive agenda, be a strong voice against Paul Ryan, make the economic case for our values. I think my background, having served in the administration, teaching economics at Stanford, having written about a lot of these policies, I can go toe-to-toe with some of the Republican leadership and argue that the progressive economic principles aren't just more fair, but they're also better for our competitiveness and our economic growth. And I think given this time, I have a better ability to be able to do that and have an impact and take some of these stands than Mike Khanna.
Go ahead, Susie.
Well, you know, I worked on your first campaign.
I remember.
And we're at many meetings. The problem with Congress now is the tremendous gridlock that frustrates everybody about it. You know, I think it's given this rise to grassroots, especially in the middle of the country. How do you propose to kind of break through that gridlock and get some stuff done? I mean, if we don't retake the Senate, we can't get the House back. It's like we're going to hit ourselves against our heads against the wall.
I agree with you. I mean, I think that's one of the most frustrating parts of potentially going to Congress, but we have seen a group of newer members coming together, forming this future caucus where they're trying to get some compromise, some co-sponsorship to get things done for Congress. I also think it's important for the Democrats in particular in Congress to really be strong on the economic issues. We have Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, of course there's Bernie Sanders. We need a few more strong economic progressive voices in the House that are going to talk about Paul Krugman and Joseph Stiglitz and their economic thinking and why that's good for the country. And I don't think we are pushing back in the House with a strong economic voice. And I think that, especially from this district in the heart of Silicon Valley, we can do that. So part of my aspiration will be to try to articulate that. When the Republicans call me a socialist, I'll say that's a tough thing, given that I represent a district with Apple, Google, Intel, Yahoo, Cisco, LinkedIn, Tesla, responsible for the economic growth of this nation for the last 20 years. So I think talking about progressive values from Silicon Valley will actually hopefully appeal to people in the middle, saying, look, this stuff is working and we're creating economic growth also.
Any other questions?
Let me try to be more brief. How much time do I have now?
You have about 3 minutes left.
Right.
So
Why don't we do a robin round and I'll try to answer more briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for being here, Roa. I was curious, recently a Republican introduced the Lead by Example Act, whereby
I saw you posting on that.
Yeah, so Congress would have to have the same medical care that the veterans do. And I wanted to hear what you thought about that, and what ideas you might have to reform the VA or to get more involved and listen to veterans who want to help and who want to get more involved.
Well, thank you, Cullen. Thank you for your service. I'm a big supporter of Cullen and Vinny for the Fremont City Council, so just wanted to plug that. But I think that that's a great thing. I mean, Congress ought to live by the laws that they make. That was a Jeffersonian ideal, and I think Congress should have the same health care as veterans. I don't think they should have these exorbitant pensions where you get pension after you serve one term. I don't think they should have the perks and privileges of getting paid travel from lobbying groups. I have a whole plan of where I think we should have Congress people live like everyone else. I'm certainly committed to that, and I can't go into it in 3 minutes, but was that. Did you have a question?
So President Obama disappointed a lot of voters and educators when his administrative inaugurated another era of high-stakes standardized testing and education with policies like Race to the Top and the collective lining up and adopting a Secretary of Education. How will you dismantle this regime of standardized testing and ensure that students and teachers have the support they need?
It's a great point. It's another place where I actually disagree with Congressman Honda. I was vociferously from the beginning opposed to No Child Left Behind. President Honda supported it. He had Ernie Duncan out here for a whole forum. I think that is the exact wrong way of approaching education. We need a more progressive approach to education, not a focus on high-stakes testing, more on collaboration, teamwork, understanding student-initiated projects. And I think we need to have teachers and people in education actually involved in making education policy. It's drove me crazy when I was in D.C. In the Justice Department, you had a lawyer. In the Defense Department, you had people with military backgrounds. In the Education Department, you didn't have people who have ever taught in a classroom. Start by appointing people who've taught into making these policies. Sir?
Yes. Mike Khanna's got a lot of seniority in the Appropriations Committee. Can you be as effective as him in getting money for the 17th district, especially back in France?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. One, I don't speak negatively of him, but you can just Google a lot of the ethics issues. The president, the vice president, Hillary Clinton, all have refused to endorse him. So I think he's 6-0. He has unanimous funding, and there's an ongoing federal investigation. So I don't think he's going to be effective if he is reelected. The second issue is I think we no longer have earmarks in Congress, and the ability to be effective is to understand where the agencies can get funding. From transportation, from the Department of Labor, from other parts. I've served in the administration. I think that will make me very effective in being able to open those doors and work with Anna Escher, Zoe Lofgren, and others on seeing how we get that funding from the agencies, especially when we don't have earmarks. The final thing is, unfortunately, I hope we take back the House, but I'm not that confident given the gerrymandering. We need be aggressive in pushing back against Paul Ryan, be aggressive on social media, campaign around the country, help recruit new candidates, help raise money for new candidates, help build that movement. I think the right time to pass the baton is when you're in the minority. If we were in the minority and he was chairing some committee, maybe I'd think twice, but not being in the minority and not when we know we're likely going to be in the minority until the next redistricting.